Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I have recently tried out Flutter's local notifications plugin, and because during the process I was not able to find many detailed tutorials, I thought I'd give it a try myself, and that's why we're here now. In this video or video series I will go over the different steps that are required to use the plugin and explain to you everything you need to know in detail so you can use the plugin and all its different capabilities. Although the plugin can be used on platforms like Linux, Windows, macOS, iOS and Android, in this tutorial I will focus only on the last two because for this tutorial I'm only interested in mobile development. The steps we will go over will be setting up the specific Android and iOS configurations to ensure the plugin works, initializing the plugin so we can actually do something with it. Then I will go a little bit deeper into explaining the permission handling before showing you how to send a simple notification. After that, I will show you how you can schedule notifications, how to periodically send notifications, and how you can stop that process. And last but not least, I will go into more advanced topics by showing you how you can define and handle actions on the notifications and how you can use full screen intent notifications on Android. To show you all of that, we're going to build a simple application that only contains a few buttons. These buttons then will trigger the specific actions like showing a notification or scheduling it. My goal for this tutorial is not just to show you the code to blindly copy it. In that case, you can ask ChatGPT, but I want you to get a good understanding of what is actually happening. But enough talking for now, let's start with setting up the platform specific configurations. Before we can start with the setup, I will quickly create a new Flutter project. So inside the terminal I will run flutter create and give it a random name, in this case notification test. And once that is done, I'm gonna open it in my code editor of choice. For me, that's NewVim. To integrate the plugin into the application, we will go to the official documentation, which I have linked down below. If not, then you can dislike the video because FutureMe probably forgot to do so and he deserves it. Inside the documentation you can then click the copy button on top, which will copy the latest version of the plugin. And now we are going to paste that in our pubspec.yaml file, and after that open up the terminal and run flutter pub-get to resolve all dependencies. Now the plugin should be integrated into our Flutter app. Now moving on to the actual setup, we are going to scroll down to the Android setup section inside of the documentation. The first thing here we are going to do is edit the build.gradle file, the one located inside the app folder, which is located inside the Android folder, and not the one that is just inside the Android folder. I know that's not confusing at all. Okay. So we are going to edit this file opened right here. Inside the Android block in which Android specific settings are configured, we will add the setting multi-dex enabled inside the default config block. The default block, you might have guessed it, contains the default settings for the Android app. And what multi-dex enabled does is really simple. You see, Android apps use DEX files to store all the compiled code when you build the app. These files, however, are limited to the amount of methods that they can reference. This limit is set to 65,536, I think, and all that multi-DEX enabled does is to allow the Android app to use multiple of these DEX files, so the app is no longer limited by that number. If you build large apps and use a lot of plugins, you almost always want to set this option. Next, we have to modify the compile options block. This block configures how the Java code is compiled. First of all, the plugin is written for Java 8, so we have to make sure that our application is compatible with that version. In my newly created Flutter app, that is already the case, so I don't need to add those. For you, that might be different, and if you're watching the video in the future and already target a newer version of Java, then you obviously don't need to change that, unless they fucked something up, which I hope they did not. To ensure that users on really old Android phones are also able to use the app, we will include the option core library disregarding enabled. This option will make sure that these old phones can use the newer APIs introduced in Java version 8 by depending them with this dependency down below, which we will also add. For this, make sure the dependency block is outside of the Android block. Next, we will have to make sure that the Android Gradle plugin is at least set to version 7.3.1 because the plugin is built on that. Depending on the version of your app, you can check that either in the build.gradle file located in your Android folder for apps using the older syntax. In this case, you would have to add something like that in here. And if you're using the newer syntax, like in my case, you need to look inside the settings.gradle file, which is also located inside the Android folder. In here, you have to make sure that this number is at least set to 7.3.1. In my case, we are already past that, so nothing to do here for me. According to the documentation, in some cases for devices using Android version 12L or above, the app can crash when enabling library debugging. But that is a Flutter specific problem. For me, I had no problems with that, so they might have already fixed that problem. Still, if that's the case for you, adding the window manager library as a dependency might fix that problem. For the plugin, it is also required to use Compile SDK version 34 or above. As of the time I'm filming the video, that is the default for Flutter. But if you're using an older version, you can change that manually inside the build.gradle file. Next up, the documentation talks about modifying the Android manifest file, but we will skip this part for now because these options will only be required for scheduling notifications, notification actions, and full screen notifications. So we will come back to this later when we implement these steps. For the notifications, you're also able to use custom icons and sounds, but for this tutorial I will stick with the default icon and sound. Maybe in the future I will make a separate video about that. And that is already everything you have to do for Android. So now we're going to look at iOS, which in this case is even more simpler. For iOS, all we have to do is add this little snippet inside the app delegate file. All this is doing is allowing us to manually control how the app should behave when a notification is sent while the app is in foreground mode. Normally, iOS would prevent a notification from being shown if the app is in foreground mode. But doing this will allow us to decide for ourselves what should happen. That, however, only works on iOS versions 10 and above. So all we have to do is copy and paste that inside the app delegate file. If you're using Objective-C, then you want to copy that. For me, it is Swift. By the way, the plugin by default is now configured to show the notification if the app is in the foreground mode. For this tutorial, that is exactly what I want, so we won't change anything about that. And that's it. That is already everything you have to do for setting up the Android and iOS specific environments. So now we can move over to the initialization part. And because this video is part of a series, you should find the initialization part inside the playlist, which you should see up here or down below, depending on the device you're watching the video. Creating this tutorial is not just for you to learn, but also for me, because I'm relatively new to the world of Flutter, and creating tutorials like this one greatly benefits my learning. But in case that I have said something wrong during the video, please correct me in the comments below, and I will pin these comments for everyone to see. This video was also the first one created on this channel, and I have already found a bunch of things that I can improve in the future. But if you have any feedback for me, I would greatly appreciate a comment down below. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.